Hey, what's up everyone? Kino here, back with another hot takes video. Today we're going to be responding to your hot takes about Better Call Saul. Now, as we all know, I have the absolute hottest takes when it comes to Better Call Saul, just for the fact that I don't think the show is perfect. A lot of people do, a lot of people love it, and don't get me wrong, I love Better Call Saul too. I think it's a great show with a lot of great writing. However, I think there are flaws with the storytelling, in particular certain characters and certain story beats that everyone else seems to love, but I hate. Regardless, though, this is not about my hot takes. Today, we're going to be responding to your hot takes about Better Call Saul, and some of you can feel what it's like to be in the hot seat for once. So, let's jump into the video here. Starting us off, we have Ella6524, who says, "I love Jimmy, but Chuck is overhated." Now, I'm not going to read this entire thing. It's a huge paragraph, but in particular, there's one line I wanted to read out, which was, "A lot of fans say that Saul Goodman was Chuck's creation, but that is complete bullshit. As a grown man, Jimmy should have proved Chuck wrong. In the end, it's his choices and insecurities that led him to become Saul Goodman." I really like this call out here. I think that Chuck is overhated. In fact, I had a whole video not really defending Chuck. I know that's kind of what the title suggests, but more so it was pointing out that, like, Chuck was right about Jimmy. He was right to critique him and judge him for being amoral, and because that's what Jimmy ends up being. And again, as this post points out, a lot of people defend Jimmy. They're like, no, it's Chuck's fault because he didn't support him and he backstabbed him. And it honestly amazes me because in the same breath, a lot of people will say that Better Call Saul is better than Breaking Bad because it's a more complicated show. It's about more nuanced characters, more real world emotions and stuff like that, compared to Breaking Bad, which has a lot more action, set piece, drug dealing moments. However, I don't understand why fans can't understand a very simple concept that Jimmy is responsible for his own actions. Just like how Walt was responsible for his own actions. His cancer diagnosis did not excuse his drug dealing. Jimmy being betrayed and sabotaged in his career did not justify what he did when he became Saul Goodman. That is the whole point about the finale, of him admitting to what he did. And it's like, no, it wasn't anyone else's fault. I don't deserve this deal. I know a lot of people don't like that finale. That's a hot take in and of itself, but I actually really do, because he's directly saying to everyone, like, no, I made my choices here. I chose to be this way. There's a lot of reasons why Jimmy chose to be this way, not just Chuck. You know, there's his whole upbringing, the whole con artist guy who kind of told him to be a wolf. All of that type of stuff led him down this road where he didn't want to, color inside the lines. He wanted to break the rules, and he was always going to end up as this figure, whether it was Slippin' Jimmy or Saul Goodman. It doesn't matter how supportive Chuck would have been. It's very clear that Jimmy was going to make the choices he was going to make, and he suffers the consequences for them. So I really don't, I can understand why people don't like Chuck as a person. Like, it's fine if you don't like him personally, but I think a lot of people misunderstand his role in the story and what the story is trying to say about Chuck and Jimmy. Like, they just come to the wrong conclusion. So I'm really glad people point this out about Chuck. He's honestly one of the best characters in this show. Moving on here, we have from Ubot7380 says, "I would have enjoyed more courtroom. We never see Saul act like Saul once he adopts the persona. Him with clients, like when he visited Walt in the classroom, was always amazing." And going along with this, we have another comment here that's kind of similar from Nine Cross, which says, "It would have been better if it had been a scheme of the week type show with a lot less serialization." Now, that's a hot take there. I will admit, when I first heard the idea of Better Call Saul, and I think we all thought this, we thought that it was going to be like that. We thought it was going to be kind of a scheme of the week. We would start with him already being Saul Goodman, and he would go through the various shenanigans he gets up to as Saul Goodman. The court cases, the sabotaging investigations, all his little connections. And the show went a very different direction with the show, and I can appreciate that. I think that actually works really well. Looking back, I think they're able to accomplish a lot more stuff than they would have done if it had been like a straight up, comedic. And I think that's even what Vince Gilligan said at one point. that the show was originally going to be a more comedy focused. I think they were even discussing doing it as like a 30-minute sitcom at one point, although I might be getting that confused with the potential Sopranos spinoff, which is a whole other thing. I did a video on that. I agree that I do think we miss out on some Saul Goodman moments. I mean, we get some of that here and there, like when he's trying to go up against the bank with the guy's house, and some certain other schemes that he does here and there. But that stuff really isn't like Saul Goodman-esque. Like in his office, in his gaudy office with his car in that parking lot. We skip over that kind of intentionally. I think that the show actually goes out of its way to kind of not show the Saul Goodman era. In fact, it's when he breaks up with Kim, or Kim breaks up with him in that case, it smash cuts away from his reaction immediately into jumping into the next phase of his life. So I think they intentionally wanted to not, I think, kind of glorify Saul, because when he's in his element, he tends to be kind of like bigger than life. He's a very attractive character, and I think they wanted to show that, like, no, he's actually a very flawed character. And I think they intentionally tried to avoid that and instead focused on how he got there and the aftermath of his time there. Breaking Bad, I guess, is the real era when we get to see the Saul Goodman persona. But I agree with you. I think we missed out on some Saul moments here, and it's actually going to lead into the next comment we have here, which is from Lion L Ahmad 2684, who says the time skip is a wasted opportunity to do something bigger. So this is exactly what I was talking about before. I think we did miss out. I think I would have liked to have seen more of the Saul Goodman era and not skip from the Jimmy era into the Gene Takovic era in the future. And in fact, if we had not had so much cartel storyline, maybe we could have had a whole season of him. Maybe Kim leaving him could have been a season finale. Let's say maybe a season 5 finale, and then season 6, at least part of the way, could have been dedicated to the Saul Goodman era, him in his office doing the stuff. And again, we could have reinforced the themes that, like, Saul is degenerating into a bad person during this era. But I do think we miss out. And again, I talked about this before. I think the cartel storyline was fundamentally flawed. I don't think it was a good idea. I don't think it accomplishes what it sets out to accomplish. I think it's a waste of time. And I think it's the show trying to be Breaking Bad. And as many people point out, this show is not Breaking Bad, and a lot of people love it for that. I love it for that too. We could have had a more focus on character storytelling, a stronger focus on our main characters, which is Jimmy and Kim, and to a lesser extent Mike. Breaking Bad, one of the things it had going for it was the fact that the entire show was focused on Walt and Jesse, with a little bit on Hank and a very small amount on like Skylar and Marie and some of these other characters. But the vast majority of character work was around the two main characters, which is why I think the show works so well. All of its screen time is dedicated to developing these characters. It doesn't take these tangents to really try to develop these other characters. And in fact, when the show does try to do those moments with like Marie's shoplifting, the audience did not respond well to it. And I think Better Call Saul suffers from having too many characters, which we're going to talk about in some of these other hot takes here. But I think if the show was entirely about Jimmy, Kim, and to a lesser extent like Mike and Chuck, I think the show would be better off for it. I think we skip the cartel stuff entirely, we'd be a lot better. We don't need to know a lot of this stuff about, like, how did Gus build the super lab? It's a hole he dug in the ground. Like, it doesn't, sure, it's, the storyline does add to some characters like Mike, but ultimately I don't think we needed to see Gus. I don't think we need to see the Salamancas really. Do we need to know how Tio ended up in a wheelchair? No, we just kind of assumed that, like, oh, he's an old man, he had a stroke, he's, not capable of walking anymore. We don't need explanations for every single little thing. And in fact, I think the time that we spent with those explanations was wasted time that we could have focused instead on developing our characters more. And we'll talk about that more in some future hot takes here. But Moving on to the next one, we have Octavian, who says, I think the character development with Mike was a little too much to have in a prequel because it makes him look too smart and competent compared to Breaking Bad Mike. The next one here about casting younger actors, I don't necessarily agree with, but going to the bottom here, there should have been more of a focus on Nacho's story and relationship with his dad versus Mike. I agree with that entirely. I think that Mike's story is good in Better Call Saul. It works. It's about him turning off his emotions. It actually mirrors exactly what Jimmy's going through too, and I think it works to have them as the two main characters at the start of the show. If you watch season 1 again, Kim is not a main character. She really becomes a main character starting in like season 2 and especially going since season 3 and beyond. However, in the first season, the story is absolutely about Mike more than Kim. And we get a lot of great development with Mike. And I think we do get a greater understanding of how he became the man that he is in Breaking Bad. The problem with Mike's storyline is that it really comes to a halt at the end of season 4. We get a little bit of him not being happy with Gus, and then he just kind of gives up on that. We get a little bit of development with him and Nacho. Again, it kind of mirrors what we would see with Mike and Jesse in Breaking Bad. However, again, because there's not as much time to develop Nacho as a character, that falls a little flat. And I think the confrontation he has with his dad, everyone's like, oh my god, this is such a great character moment. For me, it feels like it's an okay moment, but it's coming way too late at the end here, and there's nowhere for it to go. There's nowhere for him to kind of really reflect on it, for him to kind of change his character more. It's just kind of a final little end off before his character just falls off, because the story has to. I mean, he doesn't die in Better Call Saul. He has to be in Breaking Bad. So there's no real like climax to his character the way that Jimmy has a climax in Better Call Saul. There's no big moment where it's like, okay, this is where the character is fundamentally transformed. He just kind of pitters out. And again, I think that's a flaw of how much time we had to spend on the cartel storyline. Not to say that the cartel storyline doesn't affect Mike's character, it does, but the problem is the cartel storyline is focused among 3 characters. It's focused among Nacho, Gus, and Mike. Whereas Nacho and Gus really don't get the time to develop or change his characters, really. Gus, fundamentally, I don't think we should have been trying to change him. He's not one of those characters who we really want to, like, understand and follow as a main character the same way we would do someone like Walt. Gus is an antagonist, and so it's better when he's more mysterious and more we only see some elements of him, and that way he can be more dangerous, more bigger than life. Again, we'll talk about Nacho in the next hot take here, but overall, I think Mike's storyline suffered from a lack of focus, and if we had spent more time with just him specifically and focusing on his development, it would have been better. Or if we cut off his story a little bit earlier, I think that would have been fine too. I think if we ended it at the end of season 4 and we just didn't follow him anymore, I think that would have been better too, because then we wouldn't have a whole, season 6 of him just standing around, not really doing anything, because the story doesn't really have anything else for him to do, because there's nowhere else for him to change, because he's at the point now we need him to be for Breaking Bad. So overall, I agree that Mike's storyline, while good, don't get me wrong, while good, wasn't handled as good as it could have been. Next one, Gak 1015 says, Lalo and Nacho should have had one final confrontation. Lalo's death was underwhelming. I'm not going to talk about Lalo in this hot take video. I've shared my hot takes about Lalo. I have an entire video about that. If you want my hot takes about Lalo, go there. I've gotten into enough trouble with the Better Call Saul community with that video alone. However, I want to talk about Nacho here, which is, again, does not get the time he needs to really develop. He's obviously meant to be like a Jesse mirror. He's a kid in a bad situation, but he's got a good heart, and he doesn't want to be in life anymore, but he's kind of forced into it. Again, the problem was Jesse essentially got 50% of Breaking Bad for his development. Nacho gets way less than this. He is a side character in this show. We really don't even begin to follow him seriously until like season 3. And again, even though that's half the show, he also has to compete with, like, he's a part of Mike's storyline and his development. He's a part of Gus's storyline. And ultimately, I think that, like, whereas Jesse gets a really strong resolution to his story, he finally breaks free. He finally goes his own way up to Alaska. Nacho does not get any of those moments there. His big confrontation at the end here with Hector Salamanca, I felt was not good. Like, I don't think this was the right climax for his character. You could argue he's taking back control of his life by not allowing the Salamancas to kill him, which was Gus's plan. However, I felt like, and this is a problem of that Better Call Saul is a prequel. If this show wasn't a prequel, I feel like he would have used his final moment here to attack Gus, to be like, hey, no, Gus is the traitor here, and screw over Gus. And that would have been a very triumphant moment, because while Hector Salamanca is sort of an antagonist for Nacho, he's not the real antagonist. He's like kind of putting his dad in a bad situation, but he's not really being antagonistic towards Nacho. Gus is being extremely antagonistic to Nacho. Gus is who Nacho should hate more than any other character. And it would have been better if his final confrontation was aimed more at Gus rather than Hector, who, while being kind of a jerk, really didn't hurt him in any meaningful way. Now, again, I know what people are going to say. Well, he couldn't do that because Gus was threatening his father. I understand that, but regardless of the logic you apply to it, emotionally, Nacho's directing his final moments at Hector Salamanca and how much he hates the Salamanca family really doesn't work, because the Salamancas have not really treated him that badly. Yes, there's been some instances where he's like, man, these guys are crazy, I don't want to be here. But that's not the same thing as like what Gus does, basically torturing the guy. And again, he chose to enter that life, and it's not the Salamancas don't have the same kind of relationship to Nacho that Walt had to Jesse, whereas it's clear Walt is manipulating Jesse and forcing him and abusing him, and that's why it feels so good when Jesse finally breaks free. The Salamancas don't have the same, their relationship is not portrayed the same way. Again, could we have done that with more time or a different focus on the storytelling? Sure, but that's not what we actually get. So yeah, I think Nacho's storyline ultimately pitters out, again, similar to Mike. You could argue he's meant to kind of remind Mike about how far he's fallen, and we're meant to see him maybe make a second attempt with Jesse in Breaking Bad to be like the true mentor figure he should have been. But again, because Nacho really wasn't forced into the life, and all of this comes at the hands of Gus rather than the Salamancas, I don't think it works as strong as it could have. Nacho is not the Jesse of Better Call Saul. He's not given enough time and development to really become that character. Moving on here, too many characters came back to make us feel better. While the Walt and Jesse scenes were cool when it came out, it completely throws off the vibe of the show near the end. And that's from D Funky 4998. I disagree on one aspect. I will agree that I think that a lot of the flashback scenes with Walt and Jesse are kind of pointless. I don't think the one where they're in the desert really adds anything to the character. I think it's kind of an awkward scene where they're just sitting there. I think that the scene with Jesse and Kim doesn't really, I get what they were trying to go for, of like sort of mirroring Jesse and Kim's relationship to the main characters. They're meant to be like, look, we're the supporting act here. I don't think that it really adds much to him. The one I will disagree with, though, is Walt and Jimmy in the safe room where they're about to be sent off to their new identities. That scene was really good, and I think it was really cool to see Walt from the perspective of not being the main character, and you see like how awful he is as a person. You see like when he's the main character, we naturally extend some sympathy. That's how television and movies work in general. We tend to identify more with the main character. So when he was the main character of Breaking Bad, we were able to kind of ignore a lot of his negative personality flaws, versus when we see him through Jimmy's eyes in that scene, we see how much of a monster he is, how just kind of rude and just unlikable he is, and how a little scary he is too from Jimmy's point of view. Like, this guy is almost inhuman. And so I think that scene really works. But I agree with you. I don't think a lot of the other scenes really worked. And I honestly wonder if it would have been better to do like a Godfather Part 2 situation where we never see Marlon Brando's performance in that movie. But we feel it. We feel the missing presence. And I wonder... it could have worked well if like Walt never appeared in Better Call Saul, but maybe he's off screen and you feel his presence there, like you felt Vito Corleone's presence in the other room. Again, ultimately I do like that Walt scene, but I don't. The other ones I felt were not necessary. And finally here we have Peter Gould is a glorified fanboy who, if I recall correctly, is responsible for most, if not all, of the unnecessary callbacks and cartel storylines that blemish the show. And Vince was an idiot for trying to make El Camino in the middle of Better Call Saul. This is from a name I'm not going to read out right now, but you can read it right there. Yeah, I agree. I've said this before in some of my videos. I think Peter Gould, who was a writer on Better Call, or in Breaking Bad, sorry. So he's not like a noob. He's very much entrenched and responsible for some of the best episodes of Breaking Bad. However, I think he had a different vision than Vince Gilligan. And when he takes over the show, starting in season 4, because that's when Vince went to go work on El Camino, and also just he wanted to hand over the reins to his good friend and protege, I think, and let him have a turn at the big seat. That's when I think a lot of the problems with Better Call Saul started to creep in. I think Peter is a little too referential. I think he likes the callbacks. He likes the stuff. Again, calling him a fanboy is kind of derogatory, but I think that does kind of describe him. I think he's like a fanboy of the Breaking Bad universe, and I think you need like a David Chase level of restraint. Like, if you don't know, David Chase, the creator of The Sopranos, was like, if you said like, oh, we got to bring this character back because the fans will really love him, he would slap the shit out of you. Like, it wasn't about pandering to the audience. It wasn't about callbacks. It wasn't about doing the fun, likable thing. It was about like rigorous storytelling and rigorous character work. And I think that Peter did not have that that David Chase level of commitment to not being fun. And so I think, yeah, a lot of the problems we can attribute to Peter Gould. Not to say that Vince Gilligan is perfect. Like I said, I talked about El Camino before. I don't really like it. And I think it kind of suffers from some of these problems too. So maybe, you know, in an alternate timeline where Vince was the showrunner the entire time, some of these things would have still crept their way in, because it seems like at this point Vince was a little bit more referential too. However, he also argued against Lalo being in the show originally, and if we had gone down that route, we would have been so much better. I hate Lalo so much. But yeah, again, I'm not saying Peter Gould is a bad writer. He wrote some great episodes, not only at Breaking Bad, but also Better Call Saul. And not to say that his run at the show was awful. It was still a really good show. It will be in my top. Better Call Saul is in my top 10 shows. I know I criticize it a lot. It's just because I feel the need to, because the community like really loves to just pretend the show has no flaws, pretend it's a masterpiece, and I just don't see it. And I feel the need to push back on that. But I wouldn't be doing that if I didn't like Better Call Saul. If I truly hated it, I would never talk about it again. There's shows that I don't like that I just don't talk about. So I love Better Call Saul. It's in my top 10 shows of all time, but it's not the flawless masterpiece that a lot of people think it is. But either way, thank you guys for watching this video. Hopefully these hot takes don't offend you too much. I know there's a lot of Better Call Saul fanboys out there, but I'm right and you're wrong, so fuck off. Thanks everyone for watching this, and stay tuned for the next hot takes video coming soon. Seriously though, Lalo does suck. Matt Joyce, Uncle Mike, Sam Cedarland, Celery Man, Countess von Zarevich, Admiral, Neil Varma, Juan Jaramillo, and Cheshire.